Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to present a session titled Better UX with the ArcGIS API for JavaScript. My name is Kelly Hutchins, and I'm a product engineer on the ArcGIS API for JavaScript team, working primarily with ArcGIS Online configurable apps. And I'm here with my colleague, Heather Gonzago. She's a product engineer on the JavaScript API team, does a lot of work with pop-ups. So in this demo theater, we're going to quickly, because we only have 30 minutes, go over an overview of pop-ups and how you can make the most of the pop-up and make it look as good as possible. So first we'll start by taking a quick look at the SDK and what's available to you in the help and the samples. Then we'll look at Popup templates and all the different ways you can format that content that goes inside of the pop-up and how you can make that look nice. And then we'll look at these two widgets, the pop-up widget and the feature widget, which are two different ways of presenting that pop-up template content to your end users. And finally, we'll take a look at how to style them using some out-of-the-box themes and then using Sass. So references, let's just go really quickly to the API reference. If you're not familiar with the JavaScript API help, it's a great resource. There's lots of information. Here's an example of the pop-up class. It has some contextual text information about how to work with that. In this case, widget. It's got some screenshots showing what it looks like. It's got a See Also section, which has a lot of good information. There's actually the source code for the view of that widget. So that's the user interface portion of the widget is open source, and there's a link to it available there. The Sass file, how many of you work with Sass at all? So the Sass file is available there. You can take a look at it. There's also a whole bunch of samples that use it that are available here. And detailed information on the pop-up view model. So that's sort of the business logic for the pop-up widget. So you can look at that class in the help as well. So it's worth spending a little bit of time looking at the API reference for the pop-up widget, the feature widget, and the pop-up template, because that's what we'll be talking about in the class in this session. The samples also available in the SDK. There's a ton of them. I just did a quick filter by the tag pop-up and came back with 13 samples. There are more samples that use a pop-up, but you can see that there are samples on docking the pop-up, doing these things called actions that Heather will talk to you about, having more than one pop-up element inside of a pop-up, working with pop-ups with promises and DOM nodes and a whole bunch more stuff you can find here. Pop-ups in 2D apps, pop-ups in 3D apps. So for each of these samples, you can come here, click on the sample page. There's sort of a live view that loads, slowly I guess in this case. Some descriptive information, code snippets, a lot of information on how it works. And the sandbox where you can actually go look at the code and play with it, and see what changes, how those changes that you make in the code affect the pop-up without having to download the code, set it up on your own web server. So it's a nice quick way to test things out. And finally, we have a help topic on styling the pop-up. We'll talk more about this at the end of the demo theater, but I wanted to point out that we do have a guide topic on it. The guide topic has some information on styling in general with the API that applies to the pop-ups as well. Now I'm going to turn it over to Heather, and she's going to talk about the Popup template.
I think I'm free. Cool. Okay. Can you guys hear me? All right. Get that higher up. Okay, so this better? All right. So when working with the pop-up, you're going to want to go in and probably format the content that you want to have displayed within the actual pop-up itself, within the widget. And you can do this using the Popup template. The Popup template, if we take a look, I'm just going in. This is not working. Yeah, if you don't mind. I'm sorry, guys. This is... Better? Yeah. Ooh, all right. Sorry. Okay, so we have the Popup template. if we take a look here, just to kind of get an idea here, I don't want to regurgitate too much if you guys are already familiarized with this. Can I get a show of hands of you guys who have worked in 4X using this? Cool. Okay. So we have a template here. Basically, it allows us to go in and format how we want to have our content to be displayed within this pop-up. So what I'm going to focus on is we have a content property within the pop-up template. The content property itself takes a lot of different things. We have content elements. It can take just a string. It can take a function. So if you created a function, what returns there, you can pass that in as your content. It also takes a promise. So once your promise is resolved, you can pass that information in and display that within your content. For those of you who here still maybe works in 3X, a few of you, okay, cool. So it's a little bit different. We have different, in 4, we have the concept of content elements. All right, so you can bring multiple elements into your pop-up template. So you can bring in text, just straight text. You can bring in fields. So if you have attribution that you want to show within your fields, you can do that. You can bring in media. So if you're working with charts or images, you can do that. And you can also bring in attachments. You can bring in all 4 if you wanted at one time. In 3, this was difficult, if not impossible to do. I can't remember, it's been a while. But in 4, we give you the opportunity to do that now using this content element class. So if we take a look at that, you'll notice here we have 4 different types of content elements. Like I mentioned before, we have our text, the media, the fields, and the attachments. All right, so what I want to show you first off is I'm just going to go in and show a quick example of what it looks like if you're working with just straight media within the pop-up template. All right, so what I have here is just a map showing data of private versus public school enrollment within the United States. This was taken a few years ago, so it could be way off at this point. But basically the way I have this working, or the way I have the pop-up template working right now, is I have it configured to work specifically with charts. So I have a chart pop-up or chart media element and a bar chart media element. So if we take a look at the actual code, that goes into this, and I'm just going to scroll down to, can you guys see that okay? It's kind of big, there we go. So what we're doing here is we're creating this new pop-up template. I give it a title, and this is where the bulk of what you guys are going to be focusing on. It's going to be in this actual content. This is where I specify the type of content that I'm working with, and I should probably preface as well is that prior to 4.10, there was no content element object or content element class. It was just one big object. So if you took a look at it, and it still is in this case, in this particular example, it's just one big object that I'm basically just passing in. You could break this out and create separate content elements, and I'm going to show you in a separate example how to do that as well. But in this particular one, what we're doing is we are auto-casting this content element into the content property. We're not going to go into too much detail on auto-casting. We have a little guide topic that talks about that as well. But if you're not sure if something is auto-castable, and the content elements are, should go ahead here. It should tell you right here okay. It'll tell you here. So in this case, you'll see here the content, it tells you, hey, this is auto-castable, so my content elements and the content elements that I'm passing in, you don't have to explicitly require them in your code. It automatically will recognize it. All right, so if we go back in there, you'll see here that we have the type. And this is the big part. So you have to specify the type that you're working with, whether it's text, whether if it's attachments, fields, or media. So in this case, we have our media, and we're gonna pass in an array of media info. So I have two. I have a pie chart and I have a bar chart. So I'm telling it the pie chart, and I'm telling it the fields that I wanna have being represented within these charts. Okay, so here, off the feature layer, there is a Popup Template property within that feature layer. I'm setting the Popup Template that I just created up here into that feature layer. Okay, so it automatically knows and it recognizes. And for the sake of time, I know there's a lot of stuff that we're showing you here. Kelly, I think you did show them the GitHub repo. Did you show them yet? Okay. We'll have a link for you guys as well, so don't worry too much if you're not catching all of it. We'll have a GitHub a repo that has all of this stuff, so you can go back in and take a look at things later on down the line. Okay. Okay. So that was the media. So now let's take a look at what the fields would look like. So if we go ahead, same exact data, but in this case, now I actually wanted to see the numbers. So I'm going to go ahead, click on, in this case, Pennsylvania. I have it configured to show the state name, and then there's a whole bunch of fields in this, this feature layer. I don't want to show all my fields. So I'm going in, I have it set up to show just a specific number of fields that I think are going to be important for the end user and what we want them to gain from looking at this map. Let me move this back a little bit. There we go. All right, so let's take a look at the code. Okay, so same exact thing again, but this time, instead of specifying the type as media, we're specifying the type as fields. I'm passing in an array of field info, passing in the name. So if we actually took a look at this service, you'll see here I have a bunch. There's a whole lot of fields that we're working with. I don't need to show all of this, but so I'm going to go ahead and, like I mentioned before, I pick out the fields that I want to show. So in this case, I'm showing the state name, but I don't want it to be state underscore name because that's ugly. So we're going to go ahead and give it a proper label. And then the same exact thing here for the private majority, private school, and so forth. All right, so what you guys may have noticed in this sample, though, is that this big, huge, long number is kind of ugly as well. So we may want to format that. We have a bit of formatting functionality that you can specify within your code. And it allows you to go in there and you can set the places, so how many places that you want to have, if you want a digit separator, and then the places that you want to have shown beyond that. So what I have back in that code, let's see here. Widget. I'll just do one. All right, let's go back in. Get back out of there. Try it again. Yeah, okay, so I only did one of them, but what you'll notice here is that I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think I stripped off, and I'd have to take a look at the code again, but I did do some formatting within one of the fields here. So we do give you that, that option as well, and you can set that directly within those field configurations. So the format. So we have the format, and you can set that directly within your field configurations. All right. And then Lastly, I want to show one that shows the showing a text. So you can go ahead and format text. You can have custom markup if you want. You can bring that into your pop-up. In this case, what I have is this feature layer, the separate service that we're using in this case. This feature layer that we have has attachments associated with it. So take a look here. What's someplace nice? You went to this is Kelly's data. She's the one that does all the fun trips and takes nice pictures. Let's make that smaller so we can actually see this stuff. Okay, so I have a feature layer in here, and I click on this point, and I have attachments set up to display thumbnails within this. So there is an option when you're working with attachments in your pop-up. You can display it as thumbnails, or you can just display it as the actual attachment name. In this case, I'm displaying it as a thumbnail. So I go ahead and I click on that. Did you actually take this? That's pretty. It's nice. Oh my goodness. So yeah, Kelly goes a lot more fun places than I do. So these are just some pictures that she took. She posted it up into her, her feature service that she created as attachments. So now we can go ahead, click on this, and we have that associated data. So if we take a look at the code, okay, all right. If we take a look at the code, we have, in this case, I'm doing something a little bit different. We are working with the attachments content element. So I said before how you could auto-cast it. You don't need to worry. You can if you want to, or you don't have to. In this case, we are not auto-casting it. We're doing a little bit different. We're actually setting a new attachments content element, and we're setting the display type as list. That's telling us, hey, I want this to show up as the thumbnail. And we're also creating a new text content element. And that text content element, we're setting the text property off of that, equivalent to, we have a field in that service that's called details. So we're gonna show the details, we're gonna show the value of that field in addition to this attachment. And then again, all we're doing is we have our template, we're passing the content in, so we're passing in that text content element and the attachments content element. And then we're setting the template that we created here within our feature layer. All right, so that's kind of drinking through the fire hose of Popup template content information. There's a lot more to it. You can play around with it to your heart's content, but just to kind of give you an overview. So the Popup widget takes that template, that information, and displays that based upon your mouse click within the view. So every view has a pop-up property associated with this. The cool thing about the pop-up is that it's responsive as well. So it can listen for when you're moving, like if you're moving your, if you're working on a mobile device or a huge, large monitor screen. Based upon what you're viewing your application on, the pop-up is responsive to that. So it should adjust itself appropriately. We have, let's see here. Just for the sake of time, I'm just going to show you where the information is if you want to get more information on some of the responsiveness stuff. If you take a look at the map view, it's also in the scene view. We've got these width breakpoints, height breakpoint properties, and basically provide a bunch of information to you within it. You can take a look as well within the styling guide if this so fits for what you need to do. Kelly will talk about it briefly, but we have a bunch of different information that's provided to you that kind of goes into a little bit more detail, and also a couple of samples that talk about responsive design or responsive applications. Okay, we have actions. So basically, when you look at your pop-up, so in this case, I've got this attachment, by default, you have an action, the zoom to action. These are called actions. These are custom behavior that you can have implemented within your pop-up. Okay, so in this particular case, the zoom to, that's just by default. But let's say you want to have something specific for your particular application. And we're going to go back to the beer. So we have a sample here that basically listens, and Denver has a lot of breweries, clearly. So basically what this application does is if you go in, you click on one of these features. If we click on, you'll notice here, this particular feature has an associated, there is a field in this feature service that has a website associated with it. So if there's a value for this brewery, and we can go in there and grab that website information, it's going to show you this action here within this pop-up. So go ahead, click on this brewery information, and I've got 512brewing.com. Never been there. So if we take a look very quickly, what I want you to look at is we have a trigger action event off of the the pop-ups view model. Okay, so basically what we're doing is we've created actions at the top. So when I created my pop-up, I set these actions, an array of actions. It's just one. Called it Find Brewery. I gave it an image, gave it a title, and then down here I'm saying if my ID is Find Brewery, I'm going to go in here, check to see if this website, there's an attribute called website, check to see if it's valid. Is there a value in there? If so, I want you to go ahead and bring it in, click it up. We can click on it and it'll display that URL for us in a separate tab. So I talk too much, so I'm going to hand it over to Kelly.
I forget what number I'm on. You press
Yep.
Okay, so I just skipped ahead a little bit. We're going to go back if there's time, but I love writing code, but I hate writing tedious code. And looking at all the slides that Heather showed, sorry Heather, with all of that formatting stuff, I don't want to type that out. It makes me want to cry a little bit. So what I like to do is use ArcGIS Online to create a web map and then just do it all through the user interface and then use that map in my application and I get all that stuff for free. So how many people are already using online portal? Yeah, most of you. So let's just look really quickly at a demo map. So here we have a map in ArcGIS Online. If it loads, well, it's going to load, and when it does, it's going to show a web map that has a custom arcade expression. It has custom arcade expression. So let me go in here and configure Popup. And you can see that they've defined the title. They've created this custom attribute display, set some information, some text, and then added in some information from some fields. Added in this attribute or this arcade expression. The arcade expression makes a list of these top 5 features. So you can click here and you get a nice little user interface to create that arcade expression. You could also add charts, pop-ups, other information here. Just by clicking add, you can say I want to add a pie chart, set some properties, and you have a pie chart. You can do the formatting in this configure attribute section. If you have a field that you want to format, like area, we can define the decimal places, etc. We can save our map, and then we have an application here that uses that web map. And if I click on one of these features, I get that nicely formatted pop-up, and I didn't have to write all that code, which I don't want to write. So if we look at this really quickly, let's change view, JavaScript. We can see that that's all the code that I had to write because I did all the work in ArcGIS Online in the web map. All I have to do is provide the web map to the map view, and then I have a few other properties here. Let me make it a little bigger, where I say that I want it to start out docked in the top right corner when someone clicks on it, because it was a pretty big pop-up, so I wanted it to be docked so that people could easily read that content. All right, now we'll go back to the other slides. So Heather showed you the pop-up widget. That's one way of displaying that pop-up template content is in the pop-up widget, which gives you that nice action bar. It gives you the zoom to action, gives you the dockable controls. It's, you know, able to be associated with the feature or docked. There's also another widget that we have in the API, which you can use to display your pop-up template content. It's called the feature widget. In the interest of time, I won't go to the API reference, but we have a link here that you can click. I'm just going to show you the demo. Hopefully I'm going to show you the, oh yeah, okay. Hi, so this sample is in the help. Nope, wrong sample. Let me just search for it. If you just go to the help and search for hover. All right. Feature. Feature. Feature widget. Okay, so here's the sample. Sorry, not sure how that link got messed up. So here's the feature widget. And what this does is this is a sample that shows you how to get the hover capability in a pop-up if you wanted to without writing a ton of code. So this feature widget just lets you put that pop-up template in some different container. Now you notice we don't have the title, we don't have the actions, we don't have any of those capabilities. But in some cases you don't need them. For example, this hover, we're just showing a little bit of information, and this div is a nice place to look at it. So let me just go to the sandbox really quickly. So you'll add that feature widget to your application. Then we create a new feature widget, give it the graphic that we want to display, and it's going to display the pop-up template content for that feature in the place that you specify. So the sample's in the sandbox. You can take a look at it. It listens to the pointer move event so that we can change the content that's displayed. Just keeping an eye on the time. All right. Sorry. No. Next thing I wanted to talk about was styling. We have the guide topic that I showed you earlier that has some textual information about how to work with styling. The API comes with a bunch of preset themes out of the box. We have a sample here in CodePen that you can use to quickly look at those different themes. The default theme is the light theme. So here are all the widgets, including the pop-up, with the light theme applied. We can take a look at the dark theme and see what that looks like and explore the various other themes that are available out of the box. To get these, you'll just import the CSS class. They have information in that styling document about the names of all these themes and how to add that CSS. But don't use this one. Okay, if you want more control and you know Sass, we have this theme utility that's available on GitHub. Here is a link to the GitHub repo for that. You can download it and install it, and I'm going to show you really quickly how to work with that. So I already downloaded the source code locally. I have npm installed to work with it. It requires that, so you'll have to install npm. If you don't know what that is, there's tons of information on Google available. So once I do that, I can just come into my terminal command line and say npm install. Hit return, and it's going to go through and install a bunch of stuff. Eventually, it's going to open up a browser page with a sample application. So then I can come in here, and I'm going to have a separate file called main.scss and a folder called my theme where I can overwrite the default behavior. There are some examples, which are all the out-of-the-box themes that I showed you earlier. So you could just come in here and copy one of the existing samples, move it over to your custom theme, and make some changes. So I've done that here, so let's copy it. I'm going to preface with the fact that I'm not a designer. So I'm going to save this, go back to it, and I have a purple background and an orange text. So this is not a good example, right? But if your organization has custom branding, if you've paid somebody to come up with some great colors, or you have a designer who's come up with a great color scheme, using the Sass is a quick way to get your color theme and apply it to multiple widgets, including the pop-up. And this is another example of don't use this particular color theme. But there are samples in here, so this is in that same source code. You can see some of the out-of-the-box themes, and then you can just say, I like everything about this theme, but instead of this calcite gray color, I really want it to be this other hex color instead. There are a bunch of colors that are available that you can use and switch to. I think, do I have it open? You can find the colors that are available to you that you can use with this variable. Here is a file called variables_dark.scss that has a bunch of options. So maybe you wanted to just change it to brown. You could copy that, paste that into the file, save it. It'll reload it. It also generates some output CSS, which you can then include in your applications.